Hello to all of our friends out there in the Boss Hole Transformation Nation. This is your host, John Broer, welcoming you to part 2 of our conversation with Colonel Jeffrey McCausland. Part 1 was absolutely astounding. If you haven't listened to it, go back last week, listen to it, because we're going to continue on in that same vein about leadership and leadership traits and characteristics. And the conversation actually picks up as we talk about decision-making and decision-making styles and decision-making models that absolutely play a role in leadership throughout the ages. So sit back and let's enjoy part 2 of our conversation with Jeffrey McCausland. The Boss Hole Chronicles are brought to you by Real Good Ventures, a talent optimization firm helping organizations diagnose their most critical people and execution issues with world-class analytics. Make sure to check out all the resources in the show notes and be sure to follow us and share your feedback. Enjoy today's episode. So when you talk about Colin Powell and 40 to 60% of the information, how is that related to the 2/3, 1/3 rule, if you will, when it comes to timely decisions?
Yeah, in the military, what we always said was, again, the perfect law is never executed because I'm still trying to make it perfect.
Okay.
So what I need to do is very carefully say, okay, the time is now. I want my organization to begin doing something at some time in the future.
Yeah.
Whatever time that exists between now and when I want them to begin, 2/3 of that time belongs to them. Okay, 1/3 of that time belongs to me. So that tells me when I need to issue my guidance and directive. Okay.
Right.
Because they need time to inform their people, organize, gather resources. If I hand them the order and say, I'd like you to start right this second, okay,
Mm-hmm.
It could be a beautiful plan. Oh, by the way, gorgeous. Okay.
Yeah.
But it's going to go very badly. Okay. So the 2/3, 1/3 rule. And then I have two corollaries to that. One is that no plan, we used to say in the Army anyway, no plan survives the first round fire.
Okay. Okay.
Because you're dealing in a dynamic environment and you're dealing with a dynamic opponent, even if you're in business right now.
Yeah.
So if you do X, well, guess what? The enemy or your opponent can do Y. So I've got to adjust my plan on the fly. I mean, Eisenhower said, plan is nothing. Planning is everything.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the second corollary I always tell people is what I call the good idea cutoff date.
Mm-hmm.
The good idea cutoff date is as we're getting down there to the final, moments to issue the plan. Somebody runs up and says, "Oh, I got this great new idea, which is going to change everything dramatically."
Right.
Okay. Well, and that's when you look at them and say, write that down for the after action review. Okay. But we've passed the good idea cutoff date. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Unless you can prove to me making this dramatic change at the last minute is going to save lives or, it's going to be really dramatic.
Right.
If it's just a marginal improvement, no, it's going to screw things up so badly in execution. It's not, but do write it down. I'm not trying to totally undermine you. It's a great idea for next time. But it's too late to implement that now.
Yeah. Makes total sense. I love that cutoff date. And you know what else that makes me think about is, we oftentimes reference Patrick Lencioni, who is known for the 5 dysfunctions of a team and so many different books and great programs that he offers. But he talks about leadership teams, or when we have a leadership team come together, that one of the principles is we come together as a unit. And while we may disagree or may not agree on every detail, we commit. So he talks about disagree, but commit. And I think that that's a powerful thing for leaders today. And I would imagine in the military, you will have troops that will question a decision or challenge it. And it's like, listen, these are our orders and we are committed to seeing this through. And this is how we're going to see it through. Human nature, that runs against human nature a lot of times. I don't imagine it's very helpful in the military if you get some people that are constantly challenging it. But that's a hard thing for a leader to do if in fact you feel, I think that this would be a better plan or an alternative, but that's not what we're doing.
And that brings you back to Gettysburg again. I mean, because I think Peter Longstreet is the guy in that particular position.
Yeah.
Yep. And his challenge is really the following: where does my loyalty lie?
Yep.
Does my loyalty lie to the organization and what is I think is best for this organization? Or does my loyalty lie to my boss, who I've been through so much together? We've been so successful together in past. They must have liked each other. Longstreet loses a number of children in an epidemic during the war. He and his wife have several children after the war, and he names them all after Robert E. Lee, supposedly. So they must have liked each other.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
this is the dilemma that he's wrestling with, which is loyalty as the follower.
Right.
Followership is something you got to talk about. How do I be a
Yeah.
good follower?
That's right.
So the best I think you can try at is to say, okay, the following. One, okay, I don't agree with this, but I can see where this might work. So I'll give you a 90% solution here, and so we'll go that one. Okay,
Okay.
number one.
Okay.
Or number two is like totally reject this because I think it's unethical. We don't shoot prisoners in combat. If I'm ordered to do that, sorry, I'm
Right.
not going to do that. Okay.
Right.
Or I just think it's going to be disastrous, and then I would have personal and moral responsibility to resign.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But back to no plan survives the first round fired. We've tried to develop, particularly in the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan in the military, a concept called disciplined disobedience.
Mm.
Disciplined disobedience. And to me, it's kind of a fancy way of describing initiative,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because we don't want people to be robots. We don't want people to blindly move ahead. My read of the Russian army, which I have studied from the days of the Soviet Union, sadly, it has a culture which goes like this. If the plan doesn't work, it's because you're not trying hard enough.
Okay.
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 If you beat your head against a wall, one of two things will give. Either the wall will collapse or your head will collapse.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And that's disastrous. Okay. But that is the mentality.
Yep.
We're going to, the plan always is right. And it's just your problem. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, we want people that are going to have what I would call disciplined disobedience, where the commander not only issues an order, but and I teach corporations this, he also or she also has to present what we call the commander's intent or the leadership intent. What am I trying to accomplish broadly?
Right.
Okay. So here's your order, but here's broadly what I want to accomplish. So within that left and right, I am empowering you to show some degree of initiative or disciplined disobedience. And I would argue that the Battle of Gettysburg is won by the Union side, by the United States Army, because of disciplined disobedience.
That happened at Little Round Top, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. A guy named Strong Vincent, an attorney from Erie, Pennsylvania, is told to move his brigade into the wheat field where they're going to get slammed.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And he encounters a courier who says, "Hey, sir, the Army's lead engineer says we need troops on Little Round Top." That engineer has no authority over him whatsoever. Vincent quickly sizes up the situation, looks at the ground, makes a quick assessment, and goes, he's right.
Yeah.
Violates his orders, violates the plan, takes his troops to Little Round Top just in time to stop the Confederate offensive against Little Round Top, which would have, if they'd been successful, enveloped the southern end of the Union line. It had been a 2-day battle and a Confederate victory.
Yeah. I'm envisioning this right now because when you were taking us around, and I know there was a farmhouse where they were stationed, correct? And you can actually see Little Round Top from there.
Yep.
I mean, it's such an absolute beautiful setting. It just stirs in you just the emotion that and the patriotism, if you will, about that day. Realizing that both sides were considered themselves patriots. I mean, would you agree with that, or?
I would agree that to some point, but at the same time, frankly, and now we're talking more history. And over time, we have used the phrases Union and Confederate, a lot. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think over time, and this is a matter of historiography, that has encouraged what's called the lost cause theory of history.
Right.
Which is a certain amount of moral equivalency.
Yep.
That exists. And I frankly, personally, that's just me, reject that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. Confederacy was fighting primarily to keep 3 million people in bondage.
Right.
Okay?
And I agree with you. I totally, but I think then they both thought they were fighting for a just cause, which Again, however you look at it, I totally agree with you, though. That is a fascinating area to study of the
Yes, it
moral
is.
equivalency. You're
Yes, it
absolutely right.
is.
Please go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other part of that equation, though, back to leadership, is it also lends itself then to why do people fight ultimately?
Yeah.
Okay. And there's really two reasons they fight. One is, and the military exemplifies this with the cultural icons of flags and
Hmm.
uniforms and stuff. We embrace certain notions of values and certain cultures, freedom, justice, the American way, all that kind of stuff. And that's epitomized in flags and bugles and all that
Sure.
kind of stuff.
Sure.
But the other reason, and I've been in combat, I can tell you why people, I think, really fight at the ultimate end. But if we get right down to it, those things are important. Don't get me wrong, very important. That what gets people to join the military at times or join an organization at time of crisis. But when really at that moment when things are really going bad, John has never let me down. I'm not going to let John down. If
Right.
John's going to continue on, then I'm going with John.
Yeah.
So if trust is what glues the leader to the organization, what holds the organization together is the cohesion of the group.
Yep.
And that's why you can see it happen. And the military is probably, again, the best example. You can have two infantry companies, which are exactly the same number of people, same number of rifles, same number of weapons, same number of everything. Okay.
Yeah.
And one of them in a moment of crisis shatters, and the other one in a moment of crisis performs. And I
Right.
think the two things that ultimately at that moment, at that critical moment, makes a difference is good leadership and cohesion amongst the team members. There's a
With
great story of the first Minnesota, which on this day, the second day of the Battle of Gettysburg, is ordered to attack. It's a regiment to attack a Confederate brigade. It's about to penetrate the center of the Union line. Well, it's outnumbered 6-1.
wow.
Okay,
Hmm.
and they make this attack and they halt that brigade, that Confederate brigade. And they suffer 82% casualties.
Oh my
It
gosh.
is the highest percentage of casualties of any unit on the field.
Mm.
And to me, they did that because we're all going together.
Hmm. You make me think of another war, another military conflict. And I actually did with our mutual friend, Rod Sanders. I actually had him on a podcast to talk about Band of Brothers and Easy Company
Yeah.
and that idea of cohesion and how that has been portrayed in literature and in film. That's what you make me think about that. That is powerful. It absolutely is powerful. Jeff, let me ask you this. This has been great, by the way. I would encourage everybody, of course, check out what Diamond Six does. You guys do just the coolest stuff, and it's not just Gettysburg.
No,
You will go. What are some of the other venues, if you
yeah,
will?
we do actually use the attack on Pearl Harbor as a case study as well. And we do that, of course, in Honolulu is the ideal place to do it.
Sure.
But we can do it anywhere as we can do Gettysburg anywhere, and we use video in lieu of physically being on the field.
Right.
We also do the Battle of Yorktown, which
Mm,
is and if you think about it, Yorktown and Gettysburg, I would argue, are the two most decisive battles in American history because
y-
in both cases, the entire future of the nation hangs in the balance of an afternoon.
that's
If
true.
you if you lose at Gettysburg, we're two countries probably, and if you
Yep.
lose at Yorktown, we're still using pounds and pence.
That's right. Yep.
So we do those three, and then we occasionally have done the Alamo. I had some Texas clients, which was always fascinating,
Oh yeah.
and we've done Apollo 13, which is fascinating. Again, really gets this issue of cohesion because all organizations have a certain amount of cohesion.
Sure.
Any organization during COVID, I'm telling you, the cohesion of the team hanging
Yeah.
together was critically important, just as much as going into battle.
Yep.
And then
Yep.
we do another one for senior groups. I've done frequently out in California though I could do it anywhere, at the Nixon Library on Watergate, and on a particular period of time during Watergate called the Saturday Night Massacre, which talks about senior leaders, talks about ethics, talks about integrity, talks about trust, and aspects of crisis leadership in a crisis, and things like power of groupthink in organizations and how that affects choice during
Right.
crisis.
Right. Oh, that's fascinating. Jeff, as we start to wrap things up, I want to talk about your book and actually books. I'm going to talk about and go into the show notes, everybody. There is a link to Jeff's book, and you co-wrote this, co-authored it with Tom Vossler. Is that correct? And it's called Battle Tested Gettysburg Leadership Lessons for 21st Century Leaders. What I love is that you give the vignettes, you talk about the history, you talk about the leaders in the battle from both the Union and the Confederate side, but then you pull it forward and say, how does this apply here? What was the inspiration behind this? Just to try to link those two things?
Well, the inspiration was that I'd been dean of the United States Army War College, and the Gettysburg National Military Park was actually created after the Civil War, really as a place for officers to go and do what we would call a staff run. Okay.
Okay.
Which is primarily looking at strategy, tactics, and operations. So, as dean of the War College, every year we would take the incoming class down to Gettysburg, and torture them for a day on the battlefield.
Hmm.
And it occurred to me, having done that frequently, that this was really a case study on leadership.
Yeah.
And if I talked to a civilian audience, I would probably not talk as much about some of the technical aspects as I would with the military.
Right.
But what we're talking about is leaders at a difficult moment having to make decisions. And it's really leadership in a crisis, because a battle is really two organizations that are both in a crisis. And what does a crisis do? Well, a crisis compresses time, reduces the amount of information we have, but we still have to make choice. And that, to me, served as a natural sort of laboratory to do that. Furthermore, I was convinced of the following, and that is, and John, I know you're going to agree because you've been so enthusiastic, that people enjoy this. I could sit in a classroom and I could talk about the concepts, and I could use PowerPoint and all kinds of arrows and all that stuff and just bore them to tears.
Right.
But if you do it on the field where this actually happened, it has what I call an intellectual stickiness that I'll remember the concept now because I associate it with a story. I was privileged to go to a talk by Ken Burns, the noted documentarian. And if you ever get a chance to listen to Ken Burns, do it. He's an amazing guy.
How bad?
But during this particular presentation, and what he was talking about was the power of stories. That's what he was really talking about. And he said, if you try to convince somebody of something and all you use is concepts, you're probably going to fail.
Yeah.
But if you use a good story, you got a chance. Okay. And I think that's so true. And then furthermore, by doing it with groups, particularly from organizations, and putting them in roles to make choices, we're not trying to test their historical prowess. We're trying to see what they would do.
Yeah.
They interact with the people that they work for every day. And I find in the aftermath, I hear back from the organizations we work with how that has powerfully contributed to cohesion in the team.
Right.
We've learned together. We now have a common language. We now have a common experience. We'll reflect on that. And it serves not only to develop, I think, people individually, but to develop the organization collectively.
Yeah. I hope our listeners are really grasping onto that, Jeff, because some would say, well, man, when we're recruiting from the top flight schools, or we're looking for people that are the highest performers in their field. And yet they wonder why performance is substandard, or there's disengagement within the ranks. There's something missing. And
Right.
that element is that cohesion. It's that understanding between people. It's that trust. Patrick Lencioni would call it vulnerability-based trust, that I know you've got my back because you know I've got yours. And you can't manufacture that artificially. Yeah, you can work on it. And it is work. That is the grind. That is the grind of building that cohesion, but it is absolutely worth it. No doubt. No doubt.
Yeah, I'd even go one step even farther, John. I would say what you're actually doing ultimately is you're building organizational culture.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
And I would tell any leader, in my opinion, particularly for large organizations, perhaps the number one job of any leader in a large organization is to build, modify, or at times destroy aspects of the organizational culture.
Yep.
Okay. And you have to think through that very, very hard. And that's exactly what we're doing. I worked with a very large school district in California. And over time, they would for about 10 years or so, they would send about 30 of their employees, not only teachers, but administrators, people who worked in a classified job, building and grounds, food service, transportation, et cetera. And so we'd do a cohort every year. And after 5 or 6 years, I was talking with the superintendent. I said, tell me the effect on you. On your organ. I said, Jeff, you don't understand. You have changed the culture. Now I've got 10, 15, 20% of my employees that have had this common experience. So
Yes.
now it's affecting our identity. It's
Right.
affecting, again, how we talk to each other and what we talk about, to the point that we're actually have changed the culture, which I thought was a wonderfully inspiring thing to be told.
Well, and it's a great reflection on the transformational work you do. Yeah, we say that culture is a result. It's not a remedy. You cannot
Right.
artificially
No.
create a culture and make it stick. You got to go way upstream. And I think that's what you're saying. We're going to take you out. We're going to give this suspended disbelief. We're taking you out of your norm, and we're going to put you in a place that's going to totally change the way you see these lessons, these people, these experiences. That's so cool. And what a great feeling that must give you in terms of, well,
Oh yeah.
fulfillment. That's why you do this work.
Yeah, exactly.
So let me ask you, before I hit record, you told me that you're working on another book, Leadership in Four Directions. Is it okay to give our audience a little
Oh,
preview of
sure.
what that's going to be?
Sure. Way back at the beginning of all this, I developed this concept, which we began using early on and actually taught courses on. We actually have a course called Leadership Four Directions
Okay.
that we teach corporate groups online. Okay. And basically, what my argument was is that as a model, as a paradigm, everybody leads in four directions. Back to the point you made early on that people lead from where they are.
Mhm.
Okay. Everybody leads the boss, and smart bosses want to be led, but then it's incumbent on the boss to create a climate whereby he or she can be led. And that
Yep.
takes a certain amount of courage. I need to be a little bit vulnerable to listen to people. I
Yep.
always say, if you're the captain of a ship, the sailor runs up to you and you're the captain of the ship and says, "Hey, captain, by the way, we're 6 inches from an iceberg." Well, that's interesting. It just doesn't have it
Right.
doesn't it just doesn't have to be terribly useful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What you want is that sailor to run up to you and say, "Hey, captain, we're 6 miles from an iceberg." Now that's interesting and that is useful. But
Yes.
again, it takes courage on the boss to create that climate
Yep.
whereby that sailor is willing to do that. It takes courage on his behalf that he needs to know he's empowered to do that. And that
Yep.
the boss is going to do perhaps the most important thing a leader can do, and that is listen.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
The second dimension in no particular order is everybody leads others.
Mhm.
That's what 90% of all the literature and leadership is about leading others. You stop in a bookstore at an airport, they'll have two or three racks on leadership and management, which is all about leading others. You and I
Yep.
both know that. But I would say of the four dimensions, it's the easiest. It's
Yeah.
not easy, it's the easiest because it has to do oftentimes with really more management theory. There's a hierarchy. We know what we're all about.
Right.
Okay. Third dimension I often talk about is everybody leads or are led by their peer group.
Mm.
You see this particularly in the professional domain. If you work with a doctor's group or lawyers or military officers, perhaps theologians, educators, but business as well, where does my loyalty lie? Does my loyalty lie to the values of the organization?
Mhm.
Or does my loyalty lie to my teammate who I've been through hell with? This person here just is, and that can bring on, conflicts of choice on people's, on people as they have a difficult time to do. Also, your peers are what help you build, I would say, grit. And there's a lot of writing on grit, resilience.
Yep.
They're gonna hang with you at difficult times. And also, there's a great amount of peer mentorship. You'll listen to a lot of people, but you'll listen to a peer perhaps a little bit more carefully.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
peer mentorship, grit, are parts of leading or being led by your peer group. And there's that danger of conflict of loyalty. And then last but not least is everybody leads themselves.
Mhm.
I like to say sociologists say people make 500 or more decisions every single day. We all make the same decision to start with, and that is, do I hit the snooze alarm on the alarm clock or not? That's the first decision of the day. We make all these decisions, but we have to think about how are we leading ourselves? How
Yeah.
do I balance out caring for myself? How do I balance out caring for my position? And as I go up to higher and higher positions of responsibility, that'll make more and more demands on me.
Yep.
And then how do I manage the those relationships that are incredibly important? My family, not only my immediate family, but I've got aging parents or those kind of issues to deal with.
Right.
And
Right.
so I always say, I used to call it, that you try to see a degree of balance between those three variables. Then I
Mm.
realized balance didn't describe it well because it's kind of like there's a mathematical equation that I can balance demands of organization, demands of family, and demands of just being me.
Hmm.
And it's really more a harmony between those three things.
For sure.
Okay. And if
Yeah.
as you get one of those out of whack, you got to get it back into
Yeah.
whack,
You feel
later on.
you feel that, or you hear that disharmony pretty quickly.
Right.
Oh yeah.
If I have a major, health issue, okay, at some point in time, I got to handle it. I got to focus on that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then when it starts, then I got to get back into, focusing on my family and focusing on others or focusing on the job.
Yeah.
So, or if I've got a really important thing with the job, I'll go to the family and say, hey, for the next week, you're not going to see much of me because I'm crashing on something. But I
Yeah.
got to keep in mind when that week's over, I got to bring this back into some kind of harmony.
Love it. Well, I'm going to ask you. Let's make a deal. When that book publishes, please let me know, because I would love to dive into that more and really give some time to talk about those four directions. I think that would be super helpful to our audience.
Thanks, John. I'd love to do that.
Jeff, this has been good, and I know we're going to be talking more. I've got some. I think we've got some great opportunities to work together, our two organizations.
Yeah.
But I want to encourage everybody, go check out Diamond Six, Jeff's company. Get the book battle tested. Learn more about the remarkable work these guys are doing, and you know what? Just realize that we really can learn a lot from history. The echoes of the past absolutely can inform the challenges of today. So take advantage of all these great resources. But thank you again. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, John.
Thanks again, everybody, for listening in, and we will see you next time on the Boss Hole Chronicles. Thanks very much for checking out this episode of the Boss Hole Chronicles. It was so good to have you here. And if you have your own Boss Hole story that you want to share with the Boss Hole Transformation Nation, just reach out. You can email us at mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. Again, mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. We'll see you next time.